1930 through 1939 by Megan McConnell. Some events that took place in the 1930s were the result of the past events that happened in the 1920s. The 1920s was a decade of criminal wealth, the start of the Great Depression, and the ban on all sale of alcoholic products. The 1930s was the decade that the United States was put back together. The New Deal, Social Security, and the first 100-day plan. Roosevelt had a huge role to play in this decade, and his acts have made ripples that are still seen today. The Great Depression. It was the downfall of the U.S., but without it, Roosevelt may not have been able to achieve presidency, and without him, no one can say how many people would have gone hungry at night or even perished to lack of income. Nor can we say when such plans of Social Security would have been invented. Roosevelt becoming president is one of the leading factors for the 1930s being the greatest decade. What caused the Great Depression is not what shaped the 20th century, but instead what was caused by the Depression and what went on during it. The stocks had been rising and they hit their peak in August 1929. Still, millionaire tycoons, cooks, and janitors poured their savings into stocks. By doing this, the stocks became more expensive than what they were even worth. The debt of the average consumer was beyond the point of liquidation. The banks permitted too many loans and they were never going to be paid back. The banks became broke, so many shares became worthless, meaning the people who invested their income into the stocks were now also broke. The United States had now become officially broke, and it was one of the worst economic crises in U.S. history. In 1935, President Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into effect. Since this took Congress's approval, Roosevelt is regarded for commending Congress for the Patriotic Act. The Social Security Act was a part of Roosevelt's 100-day plan, meant to put America back on its own 2 feet. Social Security was originally created to battle the concern of unemployment in the United States. It is now used for men and women who wish to retire and not have to worry about going completely broke, although there are limits. In our day and age, we have more than just Social Security to fall back on. For example, welfare, or in other words, the WIC check. It helps more than just the unemployed, but also the new families that are on low income, families that are struggling to provide for their newborn children, etc. President Roosevelt stated that we can never ensure 100% of the population against 100% of the hazards and vicissitudes of life, but he made sure to accomplish the act of helping millions of people in our nation. His actions are still seen today as an example of what should or needs to be done to help the people of America. President Herbert Hoover was sure that the Great Depression was a passing incident in our national lives. He also didn't think that it was the government's job to help or influence the economy in any way. This can be seen as a major reason that Herbert Hoover may have been looked down upon by the people of the states. They are in the worst economic depression that had ever been experienced before, and the leader calls it a little crisis and has no intention of assisting the economy? In 1933, when Roosevelt took office, he put his plan of the New Deal into effect as soon as he could. This consisted of multiple experiments to help get the untied states back on its feet. The day after Roosevelt's first inaugural address, he declared a 4-day bank holiday. This was meant to stop people from withdrawing all their money from the banks, a rest period. The next thing that Roosevelt sought to accomplish was to abolish prohibition, so he looked to Congress to pass the 21st Amendment, ending prohibition. To stop the overflow of agricultural produce on the market, Roosevelt paid the farms to leave their fields dry. Thus restored the value of farm produce. Steps like this didn't just shape the 20th century, they brought it back from the dead. This was the beginning of Roosevelt's resurrection of the United States, the first 100 days. Isolationism started in the colonial times, where the people of the soon-to-be United States of America were very reluctant to be part of European affairs. Isolationism never meant to keep to ourselves, but instead avoid war due to an allied nation requesting assistance, so there were not to be alliances. This relates to the Neutrality Act of the 1936, because we do not assist in combat but only necessities of warfare. American firms were able to sell trucks and petroleum to Franco on credit. When war erupted between China and Japan, Roosevelt found his loophole in the Neutrality Act. Neither nation had declared war on one another, so the U.S. had all rights to sell and transport material to help the war. In 1941, the Lend-Lease Act finally permitted the federal government to provide military equipment to nations in war, meaning the nation that it favored. The distribution of military equipment caused a boom in the U.S. economy after the downfall of the Great Depression. This gave jobs to people and put food on the table. The decade of the 1930s was the most important because it was the beginning of the nation's revival. The Great Depression had just wreaked have it, and due to Roosevelt's quick thinking and economic experimentation, he was able to bring the economy back from the dead. Social Security would not have been able to save families if he did not have the power to be able to achieve presidency, and a large motive for him to become president to the people was to help fix the economy. The Lend-Lease Act was helpful because it put people to work in factories, and that put food on the table for families in the U.S. And this is my MLA sites. And this is the end of U.S. history. Goodbye.